You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's April the 10th, and welcome to Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. Good morning, Rev Cindy. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Al. Doing pretty good. The snow is finally gone.
Oh, all right. Good stuff.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you, we haven't really got any snow around here, but we still got the cold air.
Yeah.
But
It's only a few degrees today, but we had a big dump on Tuesday of a ton of, well, I shouldn't say a ton of snow, but a good couple of inches, and it stuck around for a day and a half, and now it's just, woke up this morning to it 99% gone and feeling like spring again.
Yeah, good. I looked at the long range forecast, and for us, it looks like about 2 weeks' time we should be averaging some teen temperatures.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Instead of these single.
Single
Yeah.
or minus. Yeah. Honestly, I've been longing for BC. I've been keeping an eye out there. 14 degrees, 15 degrees, 12 degrees. And I'm like, geez, I should have stayed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what's coming eventually. It's making its way. We're getting
I'll
there.
get here.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Anything new and exciting you want to discuss before we get going in the news?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right.
What about you?
Well, no, not offhand that I can think of. But I'm sure I'll think of something before the end of the show. All righty, here we go. First story of the day, it's up.
Coming to us from Cannabis Law Report, American College of Physicians advises against the use of medical cannabis for most patients with chronic non-cancer pain.
Huh?
Yeah.
What? One of the nation's largest medical organizations has released a cautious new guideline that recommends against the use of medical cannabis for patients with chronic non-cancer pain. The American College of Physicians represents over 160,000 internal medicine doctors and medical students in the United States. The ACP's best practice advice, recently published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, is based on a review of medical cannabis in over 36 randomized controlled trials and observational studies.
It urges physicians to warn patients that the harms of cannabis and cannabinoid use outweigh their potential benefits. Some of this stuff is really hard to read. Cannabis may produce small improvements in pain, function, and disability, but potential harms include addiction and cognitive issues, as well as cardiovascular, gastrointestinal, and pulmonary problems. Where are they getting this information? The best practice advice is important for practicing physicians when counseling our patients on the potential use of cannabis and cannabinoids to treat their chronic non-cancer pain. This is coming from Isaac Opal, who's an MD and president of the ACP.
What's the option if you don't want your patients to use cannabis? What's the option?
Opioids, addiction, death.
Yeah. As he's quoted here as saying that as the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes grows, it's critical to open the dialogue and review the emerging evidence related to benefits and harms. We need to raise awareness and get the word out to ensure that patients have the information they need to make informed decisions. Now, the use of cannabis has steadily grown in recent years, with polls showing that nearly 1 in 4 U.S. adults have used medical or recreational cannabis at least once in the past year. Although chronic pain is the most common reason patients use medical cannabis, most have never discussed it with their physicians. Many get their information about cannabis from dispensary workers who typically do not have any medical training.
The ACP recommends against the use of cannabis for chronic pain by young adults and adolescents, patients with substance use disorders, patients with serious mental illness, patients who are pregnant or breastfeeding, because, of course, there's no cannabinoids in breast milk, and frail patients at risk of falling. Inhaled cannabis is not recommended for any patients. Excuse me while I grab my joint. There is some evidence that patients with painful neuropathy may benefit from using cannabis products that contain equal amounts of CBD and THC.
Now, the ACP says evidence shows that in patients primarily with chronic non-cancer therapeutic pain, a cannabis formulation with a comparable THC-CBD ratio probably results in small improvements in pain severity. They say about 0.5 to 1.0 points on a 0 to 1 pain scale. And function or disability, about 0.4 improvement on the pain scale. And that's all. However, the evidence is insufficient to show benefit for other types of chronic non-cancer pain. High THC-CBD ratio, synthetic or purified products may result in small improvements in pain severity, but no change in overall function or disability.
Well, then, I'd love to have a chat with these people. Currently, 24 states in the District of Columbia have legalized cannabis for adult, recreational, and medicinal use. It is legal for medicinal use only in another 14 states. Research into the pain-relieving benefits of cannabis has been slow in the U.S., largely due to cannabis's status as a Schedule I controlled substance, the same category as LSD and heroin. LSD shouldn't be on that either. The DEA dragged its feet on implementing a request from the Biden administration to reclassify cannabis as a Schedule III controlled substance that could be used for medical purposes. Rescheduling cannabis does not appear to be a priority for the Trump administration.
More on that in our upcoming story. There are only 3 cannabis-based medicines approved for use by the FDA: dronabinol, nabiline, which are used to treat nausea and loss of appetite, and a concentrated form of CBD used to control seizures from childhood epilepsy. Now, a German biotech company is in preliminary talks with the FDA about approving an experimental cannabis extract for chronic low back pain. A recent study in Australia found patients with chronic pain and other health conditions showed significant improvements in the quality of life, fatigue, and sleep after taking cannabis oil over a 1-year period. There was also small improvements in pain, anxiety, and depression. So the story finishes off with the FDA says it improves lower back pain, but at the beginning of the story it says non-cancer pains. It doesn't help. Things that make you go,
Yeah, all right. It baffles me that 100 years later, 102 years later, we're still arguing reefer madness.
Yeah.
It's 1923 was a long, long time ago, 102 years ago. It was criminalized then, and only because they wanted to make money. They didn't want to lose money on cotton and paper, and they would. There were so many reasons why it was criminalized, and I'm just baffled that we still have people that think it's 1923.
Yeah. G'day, Gordo. How you doing, buddy? Yes, I know it is. It's so wrong. So.
Yeah, it's
all right. All right, we touched a bit about this next story on Monday, and we're going to dig right into it today. Here we go.
Coming to us from the National Post, Mi'kmaq man gets house arrest after failing to argue Aboriginal right to traffic in cannabis.
That's right. In Nova Scotia first, a judge has sentenced a Mi'kmaq man to 3 months of house arrest for running a roadside cannabis dispensary that operated among many other cannabis peddling outfits in a First Nations community. Darren Charles Marshall argues unsuccessfully that in running an operation called the Farm Barn in Millbrook, New Brunswick, First Nation, he was exercising a treaty or Aboriginal right to traffic in cannabis, according to the Associate Judge, Chief Judge Rhonda van der Hoek, who sentenced him recently in a Truro Provincial Court.
There was no foundation to support such a conclusion, and the court dismissed the application before it even got off the ground, the judge said. It is worth noting that a belief in a right is quite different from an understanding based on a considered analysis of a situation. Our society is democratically organized around laws, and determining that a law does not accord with one's preference does not entitle one to breach it. The judge noted a proliferation of illegal cannabis trafficking operations across the province on First Nations land, and the RCMP are actively engaged in shutting them down. This, it was argued, is the first sentencing decision to be delivered in such a matter. The Crown characterizes cannabis trafficking as serious and Mr. Marshall's degree of responsibility as high. The court agrees with those characterizations. I hope that he appeals.
Yeah. The judge imposed a 6-month conditional sentence on Marshall for possessing cannabis for the purpose of selling it, and a 12-month conditional sentence to be served concurrently for the Excise Act charge of receiving for the purpose of sale a cannabis product that is required to be packaged and stamped. For the first 3 months of his sentence, Marshall will be on house arrest with limited opportunity to leave his dwelling. For the next 3 months, he will be subject to curfew from 10 till 6 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Van der Hoek wrote in her decision dated March the 31st.
She also issued forfeiture orders for seized items, including the building and the cannabis-related items as agreed to by council, and fined Marshall $8,762.50. The fortified items include 3,000 grams of dried cannabis, 49,000 milligrams of cannabis extracts, and 99,276 milligrams of cannabis edibles.
The Melanies field community complaints about the flower barn. The judge said in her decision. It's quoted here as saying, the RCMP warned Mr. Marshall that his cannabis trafficking business was illegal, yet he continued to operate outside the legal regime. He did so because he believed he had an Aboriginal and or treaty right to do so. There is no suggestion that the business operated as a compassion club. This was a commercial enterprise.
The Crown, noting the proliferation of illegal dispensaries, emphasized the need to deter others who are currently operating illegally and those who may aspire to set up illegal commercial cannabis trafficking operations in our communities. This is Van der Hoek noting it is the court's understanding that the Millbrook First Nation did not and does not support the operation of cannabis trafficking enterprises on its lands. If we scroll down a little bit, we see a picture here of King of Weed, which is not anywhere near in a completely different area than the flower barn. Marshall's case requires focus on general and specific deterrence, said the judge. The court takes judicial notice that this type of offense is proliferating in the province. It is important to send a message that cannabis supply offered through Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation is subject to tax that funds the healthcare costs arising from its use, and that the product is derived from legal sources. The legal regime aims to disrupt organized crime involved in the production of cannabis and ensure that Nova Scotians purchase regulated product.
Marshall's lawyer also tried arguing that Nova Scotia regime for lawful cannabis sales in the community was somehow inconvenient, says the judge. However, an individual's personal assessment of inconvenience and the practical realities involved in purchasing a regulated product such as alcohol or cannabis does not permit one to simply fire up a still or openly traffic cannabis from a baby barn on a First Nations community.
Okay, I need to interrupt there because here in Canada, and I think all of Canada, from Nova Scotia for sure, my parents used to do this. They did have stills because they didn't always want to go to the liquor store. Mom made her own rum. Mom made her own wine, red and white, and Mom was very, very good at it. You can do that legally here in Canada. So, yes, we are allowed to actually fire up a still for alcohol.
And there you go. Marshall's lawyer also suggested entirely without support that this province is engaged in conversations to legalize cannabis sales on First Nations community. The judge has no information with respect to whether that is the case, and even if it is, courts sentence offenders in accordance with the law in effect at that time.
The Nova Scotia government announced Friday that Mi'kmaq communities will be able to open legal cannabis retail stores on reserve if they agree to follow the NSLC rules. The move comes in response to concerns raised about illegal cannabis sales on reserve. Rules authorize sellers must abide by include not selling to minors, selling no more than 30 grams of cannabis per transaction, and not allowing sampling on the premises. Marshall is related to the late Donald Marshall Jr., said the judge, whose legacy stands for the advancement of treaty rights in the fisheries. There can be no doubt that Donald Marshall Jr. was in part an inspiration for the offender with respect to his actions, but he should also be aware of the evidentiary foundation was necessary to advance the right. And even those rights achieved in R versus Marshall are subject to the government's lawful authority to regulate, in that case, the fisheries.
Marshall's lawyer argued unsuccessfully for a conditional discharge. A discharge could have been a minimal or weak deterrent or even a low cost of doing business and encourage those inclined to open an illegal cannabis trafficking operation, says the judge. It is therefore necessary that a sentence have the deterrent effect of reminding the public that even those without criminal records who traffic in cannabis will pay a heavy price. The Crown says people are watching this case to some degree, and if it is believed that an indigenous person who wants to run a trafficking enterprise on reserve will receive a discharge, no disincentive exists. And in this case, the RCMP seized the physical building in aid of shutting down the operation.
It's not the only one. They literally a few years ago, back in I think it was 2020, they went to the same area, which was one of our first green miles here in Nova Scotia, where there was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, I don't know how many of these little baby barns set up along this one street. And they literally went in and took all of the barns, like not just the stuff, but all of the physical barn buildings, mini homes, micro homes. And then recently, the flower barn isn't the only one that they've gone in and done. There was one too close to me that were operating in these micro barns, and the RCMP did the same thing around the same time, came right in and took it all, like literally building and everything. We have 6 that I know that are operating, 4 on reserve, 2 off reserve that haven't been touched yet. And then there's one more that's operating off reserve, owned by the same person that owns the other 2 off reserve, that was raided and opened the next day.
You got to wonder if this case is going to have a ripple effect across the country because of the fact that it says it is the first case of its kind to bring those treaties and all that involved in the court case. Yep. Through my conversations with Tim Barnhart, Legacy 420, and during interviews on the broadcast here on the Pace Radio show, we've discussed about what he went through back in 2015, and how the Crown, the police came to him, they wanted him shut down. He threw a bunch of information at him, and the Crown came back to them and said, "Don't touch it." They left him alone, and then it just as we know now, as we always discuss, I'm in the middle of 2 of the largest reserves with the most stores in them.
2 of my favoriteest green miles ever. Yeah, so it's I'm sure that Marshall is going to, he'd be silly not to. This is, I feel like this is going to go all the way to the top. Like, I mean, following Allard and Smith, to be honest. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I hope it goes all the way. And I am hopeful for Indigenous cannabis. Like, I mean, you know, I would like to see the dispensaries stay. You know, I visit them on a regular. They are nice dispensaries, good product, good people, knowledgeable people. They know about cannabis. You can go to any of them. And, you know, it's been the same people working there for years, and they know their stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway.
All righty. On to the next story. Here we go.
Coming to us from Marijuana Moment, former DEA and HHS officials suggest cannabis rescheduling could be delayed indefinitely if Trump doesn't proactively support it.
Uh-oh. Here we go. Without proactive advocacy for cannabis rescheduling from President Donald Trump personally, the process could stall indefinitely, former officials with the DEA and U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says. What's more, rescheduling proceedings that are currently paused could be suspended altogether if the new administration reinterprets legal arguments about federal drug policy that were made by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel under the Biden administration.
During a virtual event organized by Ohio State University's Drug Enforcement and Policy Center on Tuesday, the officials pulled back the veil on the drug rescheduling process and weighed in on the fate of the proposal to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to 3 of the Controlled Substances Act. While HHS and the Justice Department backed cannabis rescheduling following the review initiated by former President Joe Biden, the process stalled near the end of his term due to issues in DEA administrative hearings. It's unclear when those hearings might resume or how DEA might approach it differently under Trump.
Matt Lawrence, a former senior advisor at DEA, said he sees three potential outcomes for rescheduling in the Trump administration. The first one is that the DEA does essentially nothing at all, kicking the can down the road and continuing to delay the process without expediently ending it. That might involve administration updates along the line, but in essence, this would be the path of least resistance.
Yeah, the DEA might alternatively do something really quick to finalize the rescheduling rule. But Lawrence said he expects that would be incumbent upon Trump making the issue a presidential priority. Supporters of rescheduling got an unwelcome update on that front last week. However, as the White House Office and Drug Control Policy released a report that outlined the administration's top drug policy priorities for Trump's first year on his second term. And it notably did not mention rescheduling or other cannabis reforms.
Oh. Lawrence said he could also see a scenario playing out where DEA moves forward with rescheduling, but the agency determines that it needs to separately propose rules to regulate cannabis as a Schedule 3 drug to meet international treaty obligations. Ultimately, however, he said the biggest thing to predict among those three paths is politics, and whether the administration perceives rescheduling as a political motivator or a detractor.
I leave that to political experts to kind of make that prediction, Lawrence said. But if it's not a political priority, or if it's a mixed political thing, like it's a win and a loss, then you've got to assume it's going to be the can-kicking approach. Patricia Zelter, a former deputy general counsel of the HHS, separately said at the OSU event that one factor she's taking into account is the fact that Trump's pick to run DEA, Terrence Cole, has long recorded a career service at DEA, which I don't think bodes particularly well for support of rescheduling.
I agree with her. There are probably institutional norms within the DEA that counsel against rescheduling, she says. OLC could issue a new opinion, taking a different position about that currently accepted medical use means, or something like that. But the easiest thing is to just do nothing, and then cannabis stays where it is.
Yeah,
Mm.
it might be
Yeah.
that things stalling out is kind of the path of least resistance forward, particularly if this just isn't, a priority. Something was jumping for a minute in one direction or another, she said. At this point, there hasn't been any public indication that Trump administration plans to reconsider the DOJ OLC opinion supporting rescheduling. But both former officials made clear that one's possibility that could quickly jeopardize the process.
The rescheduling proceedings have generated significant public interest. While moving cannabis to Schedule 3 doesn't federally legalize it, the reforms would free up licensed cannabis businesses to take federal tax deductions and remove certain research barriers. In February, a nonprofit organization of pro-cannabis reform doctors filed a brief in federal appeals court arguing that evidence had surfaced demonstrated that DEA carried out an arbitrary and capricious review of the witnesses for the cannabis rescheduling hearings, and that the process should be redone. And I completely agree with them.
Absolutely. Prior to DEA administrative law, Judge John Mulrooney's ruling that delayed the reschedule hearings, Doctors for Drug Policy Reform, the D4DPR, separately filed a request with the Federal Appeals Court seeking a stay of the proceedings. Another organization that was also denied participation, the Veterans Action Council, VAC, similarly filed a petition with the same court in December to request a review of the agency's decision to exclude it from the proceedings.
Just so everybody knows, the Veteran Action Council, you can see them every Sunday night at 8 o'clock here on the Pace Radio Network. In his notice to former DEA Administrator Ann Milgram, the agency judge explained that it followed his denial of a motion that sought DEA's removal from the rescheduling process altogether, arguing that it is improperly designated as the chief proponent of the proposed rule, given the allegations of ex parte communications with anti-scheduling witnesses that resulted in an irrevocable taint to the process. Yes.
Yeah.
In January, Mulroney also condemned the DEA over its unprecedented and astonishing defiance of a key directive related to evidence it is seeking to use in the cannabis rescheduling proposal.
On the executive side of the issue, the current HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was previously vocal about his support for legalizing cannabis as well as psychedelic therapy. But during his Senate confirmation process in February, he said that he will defer to DEA on cannabis rescheduling in his new role. Former Representative Matt Gaetz, Trump's first pick for U.S. Attorney General this term before he withdrew from consideration, says meaningful cannabis reform is on the horizon under the current administration, praising the president's leadership in supporting rescheduling.
Leadership? I'm sorry. After Gaetz withdrew from consideration to lead the DOJ, Trump then picked Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to run the department, and the Senate confirmed the choice. During her confirmation hearings, Bondi declined to say how she planned to navigate key cannabis policy issues, and as state attorney general, she opposed efforts to legalize medical cannabis. Adding to the uncertainty around the fate of the rescheduling proposal, Trump's nominee to lead the DEA, Terrence Cole, had previously voiced concerns about the dangers of cannabis and linked its use to higher suicide risks among youth.
Wow, they're really going backwards down there. Some stakeholders believe leveraging Trump's stated support for rescheduling and appealing to him by framing the issue as a means to support veterans and patients could motivate the president to advocate for the reform from the Oval Office. Regardless of how other officials in his administration feel, the thinking goes a mandate from Trump would not go unheeded. To that point, a cannabis industry-funded political action committee, PAC, is attending Biden's cannabis policy record as well as the nation of Canada, with new ads promoting sometimes misleading claims about the last administration while making the case that Trump can deliver on reform.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with the contents there where if Trump says he wants to do it, it'll be done. Because they'll do what he wants them to do. But other than that, the opinions of all those people who are in those positions sure doesn't look very encouraging, does it?
No, and the only one that I see that had support for cannabis was Kennedy, and they
Yeah.
seem to have muted him.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Exactly. Alrighty, we got one more story before we go to break, and I will bring this up. And I didn't get to really read this story beforehand, and I don't always read the stories beforehand. But this one, I'm curious what the
Yeah.
answer is to this question. Here we go. So,
Coming to us from cannabis.net. What do cannabis consumers think about driving under the influence of THC? New survey says.
well, we'll find out. What do cannabis surveys say? Here we go. Well, cannabis has numerous benefits for health and lifestyle. There are certain situations that are extremely controversial and cause major divides in opinions. Examples of these situations include cannabis use while pregnant and while driving, among others. In this article, we'll discuss the latter, driving under the influence of cannabis, and what cannabis consumers think about it. Why is it that many cannabis users have zero issues smoking while high? Then again, there are some people that are more prone to getting into a traffic accident while they're high on cannabis.
I think they typed in smoking where they should have typed in driving. Why is it that many cannabis users have zero issues smoking while high?
Yeah. I know. I was thinking when I read it. Eh?
People also have different perceptions of risk, societal norms, and personal beliefs that affect how they perceive potentially risky situations, such as driving under the influence. Yet, regardless of that, the cases of DUIs and impaired driving has risen sharply in the United States because cannabis is already legal in some form in 38 states. The AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety recently released the results of two separate studies designed to analyze the thoughts and perceptions of cannabis consumers when it comes to driving while stoned, while the second was to help craft a campaign to help prevent these behaviors. According to Dr. David Yang, the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety's president and executive director, he says understanding what motivates cannabis consumers to drive under the influence can be helpful in developing effective safety strategies.
With insights on perceptions, decision making, and behavior, we aim to inform policies and interventions that make our roads safer for everyone. Based on the feedback from the respondents, they found that 44.1% were daily or frequent consumers of cannabis, which meant they had partook in it several times a day. Meanwhile, 57.8% of them said they drove every day, and 84.8% admitted that they drive on the same day they consume cannabis. A surprising 53% of them said they consumed weed an hour or less before they hit the road. However, basically 47% of the respondents believe that cannabis consumption either contributed to them driving the same, while 14.7% think that it helps them drive a little better, and 19% of them think it helps them drive a lot better. That said, 38.5% said they would believe messaging surrounding cannabis use and its safety when it comes to driving from industry groups or other brands and companies.
Effective messaging about cannabis impaired driving needs to include credible voices, real world scenarios, and respectful language, explains AAA Director of Traffic Safety Advocacy, who is Jake Nelson. He goes on to say individuals who consume cannabis come from all walks of life, and that should be reflected in the messaging. In summary, tailored public health messages that can promote safe driving habits, especially among cannabis consumers, can help ensure that the roads are kept safe for all.
The effective messaging about cannabis impaired driving part where you mentioned there, I guess that wouldn't include some joint that's floating through the sky, through the ads that we've seen here in Ontario, where there's joints talking to people and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't think those are the ones they recommend.
We have groundhogs on some of our adverts, so
yeah. Now where were we? Perhaps seasoned cannabis consumers far better on the road compared to people who don't. While there's no evidence to prove this, there are some studies as well as anecdotal evidence that supports this claim. After all, experienced cannabis users can already develop some kind of tolerance in their impairments brought about by cannabis use, which can affect one's driving performance. Said impairments can include, but are not listed to, slower reaction times on the road, lane weaving, and difficulty managing complex cognitive tasks on the road. Now, those lane weaving, I've heard them talk about cannabis consumers may not weave back and forth from lane to lane, but they weave within the lane.
Everybody does.
That's what I thought too.
One study in particular demonstrates that experienced cannabis consumers don't display significant alterations in their driving performance. For the study, Australian researchers analyzed this simulated driving performance with baseline observation followed by 45 minutes after vaporization of cannabis flower. After vaporizing one dose of their prescribed cannabis flower, participants exhibited no significant changes in performance on any of the video-based tasks: hazard perception skill, gap acceptance, following distance or speed, compared to baseline, reported the investigators. They conclude that a dose of vaporized cannabis consumed in accordance with prescription may not affect hazard perception ability or driving-related risk-taking behavior among medical cannabis patients.
Another similar scientific paper revealed similar findings. This time, a study out of the UK involved reviewing all existing human trials that analyzed the cannabis tolerance of subjects after repeated exposures. The British investigators analyzed a total of 36 trials of over 1,000 subjects. They found that repeated doses and exposure to cannabis did not or had very limited effects on impairment when it came to the subjects of psychomotor and cognitive performance.
Yeah, the study authors specifically noted that subjects who had repeated exposure to THC or cannabis displayed either full or partial tolerance in psychomotor and cognitive abilities. Studies indicated relatively minor or no effects of repeated Delta-9 THC administration in regular users on a number of cognitive domains, including learning, memory, vigilance, and psychomotor ability. The absence of effect in regular users might indicate the development of full tolerance, they say. Available evidence suggests that the effects of acute cannabis or Delta-9 THC administration are less prominent in individuals with a regular pattern of cannabis use compared to non-regular users. Cognitive function appears to be the domain most likely to demonstrate tolerance upon repeated exposure, with some evidence of full tolerance indicating a complete absence of acute effect, they concluded. The acute, intoxicating, and cardiac effects of Delta-9 THC are also blunted upon regular exposure. Similar but limited evidence also suggests blunted acute psychomimetic effects of Delta-9 THC individuals using cannabis regularly, they said.
In summary, individuals who consume more cannabis on a frequent basis will develop a tolerance not just to the plant itself, but to the intoxicating effects of the cannabis on the human brain and body. For this reason, we can easily see why experienced cannabis users are more confident and safe drivers even while they're stoned. And in conclusion, they say, while we don't encourage driving under the influence, people will still continue to do it, no matter what the law says. Some even believe it makes them a better driver. That said, it's a risky behavior, yet there is a population of individuals who can safely do so without any troubles. Individuals, especially those who are new to cannabis consumption, must keep in mind that THC will have an effect on coordination, reaction time, perception, and decision making. So it's best avoided whenever possible. So there you go. Yeah, new users. I can see the point on new users, Absolutely. And I see the point on the regular consumers.
Yep. I mean, yeah. I know my levels, right? Like I have, I've been, even recently in the last couple of years as a regular user for many, many years, be at a friend's place and go, yeah, I know it's late, but I can't drive home yet. I need a cup of coffee, right? I know when I can't drive. When you came to visit me in Toronto, how many times did you say no to the joint being passed because you had to drive back home? You know,
Yep.
we're not irresponsible people, especially regular users that you have been using it for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to bring that up. You and I got together in Toronto, and we went to the cafe dispensary, and I didn't consume anything, knowing that I was going to be jumping back on the highway, and I had myself a 3 hour plus drive home.
Yeah, in high traffic. So you played it smart, and made sure that you were looking after yourself and anybody else on the road.
Yeah,
Responsible.
exactly. Yeah. If you're drunk, that's a whole different scenario.
Yeah.
So, all right, time for us to take a break, off to commercials, and we'll be right back in about 2.5, 3 minutes. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. We're live here at paceradio.net and the 420pace.ca.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor? If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Hey, we're back from our medication session. What are you giggling at?
Running and doing little things during the commercial, and it's like listening to the songs, and I heard the last one. I'm like, whew.
Yeah, we're about to come back. We better hurry. So, alrighty, we've got 4 more stories to cover, and here we go. First one's up.
Yes, coming to us from Fox, Oregon 12. Portland facility treats traumatic brain injuries with psilocybin.
All right, brain injuries. A psilocybin treatment facility in Portland is studying how magic mushrooms can help reverse the effects of concussion and traumatic brain injuries. Experience Onward, a Portland-based psilocybin treatment center, will host UFC fighters, bare-knuckle boxers, and martial artists from around the world this weekend to see if mushrooms can repair their brain damage.
The fighters are traveling with Athletics Journey Home, a nonprofit founded by retired American mixed martial artist Ian McCall. One of the patients coming to Portland for treatment is Mark the Shark Irwin, a former bare knuckle boxing world champion and 3-time BKB Hall of Fame award winner.
Irwin says, I have had my fair share of concussions. I made global headlines in 2023 after the bare knuckle boxing fight of the year because I had one of the worst hematomas of all time, and I broke my jaw in that fight. Now I can see the impairment as a result of almost 15 years of getting punched in the head. He says he suffers from short-term memory loss, has trouble talking and forming sentences.
His coach and mentor, McCall, suggested trying psilocybin therapy, and Irwin was ready to sign up. It's exciting to be involved in the nonprofit as a board member, but also as a guinea pig or a lab rat of sorts, and getting to test out these therapies and treatments, Irwin said.
He is one of 8 fighters who traveled to Portland for guided mushroom therapy at Experience Onward. Daniel Carcello, he's a former NHL player. He says, I wanted to have a facility and a center to create SOPs and manuals that concussion survivors can use to get the same healing that I have found. And SOPs are standard operating procedures.
Yeah, in 2015, Carcello retired from the NHL and was diagnosed with dementia. He traveled the world looking for treatments. And in 2019, he read a study that found psilocybin could be helpful in healing brain damage. In 2020, he went through 2 high-dose psilocybin treatments over 6 months. And about a year later, he said he was healed.
Wow. He says that psilocybin has reversed all signs of my brain damage. Neurologists can't find any abnormalities in my brain scans, and my blood work is coming back clean and healthy. Wow. Now Experience Onward is continuing to research how mushrooms can help heal brain damage from concussions.
In order to get more people to listen to this, that I could be beneficial for them and to get over the stigma associated with it, we collect data, so we are a little different from than other centers, he says. On Friday, Irwin and the other fighters got their baselines measured.
Now, Irwin explains that they did some brain scan imaging and then some basic tests like words, puzzles, and computer game type things. All that to get a baseline for my overall cognitive abilities. And on Saturday, they will take their first dose of psilocybin and go through the therapy session.
Finally, on Sunday, all the fighters will get another brain scan to compare and document results before and after the treatment. Carcello said human observation studies like this are an essential part of the research process, and he hopes it will lead to further legalization and treatment options.
And I hope that we can find the follow-up story to that.
Do you remember the story that we did about hearing in psilocybin?
Yeah.
I know somebody who has very bad hearing, and they have the issue with them is that they'll hear one word, like one word will go in the ear, but it'll register as another word in the brain because of that broken synapses. So I asked them, I said, would you let me experiment on you, and would you microdose? I knew they wouldn't be open to macrodosing, so I asked them to microdose. And they've been microdosing for almost a month now, every second day, and there is change.
There is, eh?
I see it. They don't see it yet, and that's okay. But from the person that usually gets frustrated because their words aren't heard, and not that I'm frustrated at the person, I'm frustrated at the dis-ease, and so there has been much less. Like we're talking probably a good quarter less of frustration of not being heard, of that person not hearing the words. I'm excited for their next hearing test, which will come up in about 6 months.
Yes, yeah. And that'll be a telltale sign for sure.
Yeah, it'll be exciting.
Yeah. Yep. Alrighty, next story.
Coming Coming to us from MJ Biz Daily, cannabis industry supply chain already feeling effects of Trump's tariffs.
Licensed cannabis operators and auxiliary companies are bracing for rising business costs, lost consumers, and vendor backlash in the wake of President Donald Trump's erratic blanket tariffs that have rattled the global economy and stoked fears of a recession accelerated inflation in the United States. Higher prices are expected to take a toll on wide swaths of the industry's supply chain, from building and cultivation equipment to product components, packaging, and raw materials, according to more than a dozen executives and economic experts acquired by the MJ Biz Daily after Trump's Liberation Day edict that torpedoed decades of U.S. foreign trade policy.
The tariffs effects are already being felt by cannabis businesses, particularly those caught in retaliatory salvos by international vendors, and are leading others to seek more domestic suppliers if and where they can. Some retailers and brands are planning to pass on some of these rising costs to the customers.
Oh, yeah, that's where they end up going for sure. They contend margins are already thin in the highly regulated and taxed cannabis sector that competes against a flourishing illicit market, likely to be emboldened by the tariff hikes. Trump's so-called reciprocal tariff order, particularly targeting manufacturing hubs in Southeast Asia and the European Union with higher rates, briefly went into effect Wednesday morning.
These tariffs are paid by U.S. businesses to import goods from other countries. By Wednesday afternoon, Trump had reversed course and announced a 90-day pause on the escalating tariffs, except for China.
And where do a lot of electronic stuff comes from? China. Yep. Under the president's reciprocal tariff plan, several countries in Southeast Asia and the European Union that supply cannabis and auxiliary companies with equipment, such as point-of-sale systems and raw materials, face double-digit tariff hikes. China is now facing a 125% tariff after Beijing failed to lift its 0.75% retaliatory tariff by Trump's imposed Tuesday deadline in an escalating trade war with the United States, largest importer and third largest exporter.
A sweeping 10% tariff, which remains on all products imported from roughly 90 countries, went into effect April 5th, triggering a record 2-day sell-off that zapped $6.6 trillion in value from U.S. stock exchanges. And this was the Wall Street Journal saying this. Trump's policy reversal Wednesday sparked a major comeback on U.S. trading indexes and fueled historic gains, the Associated Press reported.
Yes, historic gains, yeah, more in one ways, I'm going to say. The advisor shares pure U.S. cannabis ETF, which tracks U.S. cannabis companies, was still trading near a 52-week low on Wednesdays, with shares closing at $2.14. Tariffs are no longer a geopolitical footnote, said Arnaud Dumas de Rowley, founder of the cannabis consultancy May the 5th and chair of Vape Safe on Industry Trade Group.
Yeah, for our industry, there's a direct threat to profitability and scalability. He added, the cannabis industry is dangerously exposed to global supply chain risks, many of which just got a lot more expensive overnight.
Yeah, Trump's policies are already influencing material costs, procurement procedures, and project risk. Industry observers have said the cost of key inputs such as aluminum, electrical gear, and security equipment, a regulatory requirement for plant-touching operators, have increased 10 to 40%, according to Todd Friedman, Director of Strategic Partnership for DAG Facilities, a Florida-based commercial construction company that designs and builds cultivation operations for cannabis companies.
Material costs for steel framing and conduit have nearly doubled in some regions, while lighting and surveillance equipment, commonly sourced from China and Germany, have seen double-digit increases, Friedman added. Procurement terms are also adjusting, cannabis business leaders said.
Price quotes, once valid for 30 to 60 days, have been minimized to a few days. Upfront deposits or full prepayments also have been initiated to secure pricing, adding more strain to cash flow.
In response, contractors are including larger contingencies into bids and contract clauses for sudden price hike adjustments. Clients may face unexpected requests for early payments or need to revise funding strategies mid-project, Friedman warned. Ultimately, tariffs are reshaping how construction projects are planned and executed.
Most U.S. vape products manufacturers, such as PAX, are in particularly bind since the vast majority of components, including rechargeable lithium-ion batteries, are sourced from China, despite recent shifts to other countries. After Trump's latest retaliatory strike, the San Francisco-based company is facing an eye-popping 150% cumulative tariff on pods, batteries, and all-in-one devices manufactured in China.
Wow. That's because the Biden administration retained a 25% tariff on vape products made in China implemented in 2018 during Trump's first term. The company's PAX Plus and PAX Mini are produced in Malaysia, which is facing a 24% retaliatory tariff.
Economic uncertainty, anathema to business forecasting and expansion, appears to be a new normal. Now, according to PAC spokesman Laura Fogelman, she says the cannabis and vape supply chains are uniquely complex, and companies across the board are scrambling to assess what these new costs will look like long term and how to best absorb them.
Wow. Countries that once seemed like the most viable manufacturing alternatives to China may no longer be, and the sourcing of component parts is becoming an even more critical part of the equation. Home growers and licensed cannabis cultivators sourcing premium genetics overseas can also expect price hikes.
Tariffs on international imports, particularly the key seed-producing countries like the Netherlands and Spain, are likely to lead to a price increase of approximately 10 to 20% for European seeds in the U.S. market, according to Eugene Borich. He's the head of the marketing at Fast Buds, which bills itself as one of the largest auto seed banks in the world.
The Czech Republic-based company, which sells seeds directly to buyers in over 50 countries, expects tariffs to have a moderate impact on operations. European genetics are occasionally used for pheno hunting and breeding projects, but the overall cost structure of our core business remains stable, he said.
We're committed to absorbing as much of the additional cost as possible and maintaining current pricing for our customers for as long as we can, he goes on to say. Kansas City, Missouri-based cannabis producer and brand Illicit Gardens is taking a similar approach with customers. The new tariffs are expected to indirectly impact our costs in everything from lighting equipment to packaging, says David Craig, the company's chief marketing officer, said via an email.
Yeah, in an industry already navigating tight margins and heavy regulation, even small increases in supply chain expenses can add up, he continued to say.
Yeah, exactly. I see we're at the top of the hour, but we got two more stories to go, and they're both stories that we both want to get out. So let's keep going. Okay. Here
the
we
next
go.
one is fairly short. We discussed this one before we went live.
Correct.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay. Coming to us from News Medical Life Sciences, cannabis extracts can improve behavior of children and teens with autism spectrum disorder.
New research presented at the 2024 European Congress of Psychiatry reveals that the use of CBD cannabis extract can lead to meaningful benefits and improve the behavior of children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder. ASD affects approximately 1 in 100 children around the world, and symptoms can include difficulty interpreting language, difficulty expressing emotions, and repetitive behavior and routines. The meta-analysis included randomized placebo-controlled studies on the efficacy or safety of CBD cannabis extracts in children and adolescents with ASD. 3 studies were used in total with 276 participants with a mean age of 10.5, ranging in age from 5 to 21. The dosage of CBD cannabis extract started at 1 milligram per kilogram per day and was titrated up to 10 milligrams per kilogram.
Key findings from the study include CBD cannabis extract use shows moderate improvements in social responsiveness and small yet notable reductions in disruptive behaviors and anxiety. CBD cannabis extract significantly enhanced social responsiveness, reduced disruptive behavior, and alleviated anxiety while also improving sleep quality. The use of CBD cannabis extract has a favorable safety profile, and it did not increase adverse events compared to placebo. And there were no significant differences between adverse events in CBD cannabis extract versus placebo.
And in the conclusion, we're going to scroll right down to the conclusion here. It says CBD cannabis extracts appear to provide meaningful benefits for children and adolescents with ASD, showing moderate improvements in social responsiveness and small yet notable reductions in disruptive behaviors and anxiety. They do not seem to significantly increase adverse effects compared to placebo, suggesting a favorable safety profile. These findings support the potential consideration of CBD cannabis extracts in ASD treatment plans. However, the review's limitations included a small number of studies, limited sample sizes, and significant heterogeneity. Future research with larger, robust trials is needed to clarify the efficacy and safety of CBD extracts in managing ASD. More studies, as they always say, right?
More studies. Yeah.
I think every study ends up with that. We need more studies. Okay. And the last one that we wanted to get out, because this is a bit of an eye-opener type thing. We're going, what? Not again. And here we go.
Coming to us from Police One. 600 pounds of cannabis stolen from Colorado State Patrol evidence trailer. Stolen.
Now, the last time this happened, it was mice, apparently. It wasn't in Colorado. It was someplace else. But, apparently mice. So let's see what happened here. About 600 pounds of cannabis scheduled to be destroyed was stolen from the Colorado State Patrol evidence trailer last week, according to the agency. The theft was discovered Friday morning when an evidence technician was conducting a property walkthrough of the Arapahoe County facility, according to the news release from the Colorado State Patrol.
State Patrol officials believe the cannabis was stolen after dark 3 days earlier on Tuesday, April 1st. Imagine that, on April Fool's Day. According to the release, no suspects have been publicly identified, but State Patrol officials said the thieves used a power tool to remove a lock on the evidence facility's gates.
Security camera system checks and exterior property walkthroughs have been increased to identify security issues faster and ensure evidence integrity, officials stated in the release. A comprehensive internal investigation is now underway to determine if established protocols were violated. There was no active case involving cannabis and no evidence was stolen, State Patrol officials said in a release.
Wow. A report was filed with the Inglewood Police Department, and the Colorado State Patrol is actively investigating the burglary. So they only went in, took the cannabis, and left. They didn't touch anything else.
Correct. So this is a building that maintains and controls evidence, but they got no security cameras on it until after this stuff was stolen.
And only the weed was stolen. Like, I mean, there was probably jewelry and, things
other
were,
evidence.
all kinds of stuff in there. And they went in and took the weed and left.
Yeah, exactly.
Those darn mice.
The darn mice. That's right. Oh, well. Okay, anything else offhand? I know you got to go.
Yeah, inside job, Gordo. Inside job is right. Besides that, I'm really thankful that I remembered early enough that it was Thursday. And I hope you have a great day and a great weekend.
You too. All right. Other than that, folks, that's our report for today. Thanks to our friends at Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, At-Eze.ca, Limestone City Hydroponics. And I hope you found it educational and informative. That's what we do, the news. Other than that, you can catch our next broadcast Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time And don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate. Have a good day, Gord. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.